Okay, perfect. So we're going to get started. First of all, thank you all for coming. You've all done the first step, which is quite important. So the reason, Dara, actually, you mind popping that music off me? Thanks. The reason why I made this mandatory this time is you guys have all passed the kind of first test. The hardest part of it is when people don't show up to the initial phase, nearly every time they don't finish the block. So that's why it was very important for you guys to come today. It shows intent. With nutrition, it's a different ball game to your training. Obviously, with your training, you have your appointment. You come here 2, 3 times a week, which can be a challenge sometimes, but in general, you will always show up and make it. With the nutrition, you have to show up every day by yourself. That's why making the first step of coming here is good. So well done on doing that. So today we're going to be going over the coaching itself. There's bits of education in it. There's bits of statistics. There's base of data off of you guys, which is good to use in terms of relatability. So the idea of today is to give you guys as much information as possible so that you have the best chance of success over the next 6 weeks as possible. So in that, I'm going to highlight to you everything that works, why we're doing it, and then highlight what doesn't work. And that way there's no fog. You know exactly what you need to do. You know exactly what doesn't work. And if something isn't going right, you know exactly what to do. So the idea of today is to make sure that you know exactly where you stand, and that way it gives you the best chance possible to make as much progress as you can. So in starting that, we have two goals here. You're going to have some people who are looking at fat loss, and you're going to have people who are looking at muscle growth. All of you should be looking at both regardless, because it's always going to be something, if you're losing weight, that you want to have muscle growth alongside that as well. So there are two things that you can, obviously for your health and then for your appearance, there's two things that you can change quite significantly as it goes through. So at the start, our first line is fat loss is incredibly simple, but not easy. So the process is extremely simple, but to do it is far from easy. It's the reason why you're all here today, obviously, because it's difficult. We need a hand. We need to have a look at a system that works, that will get you the results. So that's what we're looking at providing today. So the fundamentals are pivotal. It's very important we understand what works, why it works, what doesn't work, and what will help and what won't help. So I'll go over all of them things as we go throughout the seminar, but that we know what's effective, we know what's worth your time, and we know what isn't worth your time. So that way you're making as much use of it as possible. So muscle growth is difficult and slow. Muscle growth is extremely difficult. The stronger you get, that becomes even more true. So the more advanced you get, the stronger you get in your lifts and your training, you have to start doing a little bit more to get that little bit more. I'm going to highlight how we can do that. So like I was saying at the beginning, there's some people who've done these blocks a couple of times. At the beginning, their goal was weight loss. There might have been weight loss for a couple of blocks, and then they've gotten to the point where they're happy with their weight, and now their focus is just purely on muscle growth and building that up. But that doesn't mean if you're looking at losing your weight that you can't focus on that as well, because it's something that we should all strive to do. So at the beginning, like I was saying, it can be a bit easier, but as you become more advanced, we need to start taking them steps. Then tools help, but aren't a requirement. So what an example of a tool would be is, let's say, for example, if somebody asked me, is having a high step count good for losing fat? I say yes, but it's not essential. It helps. It'll definitely make the process quicker. It makes the process easier, but it's not essential. So it's about understanding what the essential is, and what that is called your energy balance. That's your calories in versus your calories out. Nothing else outside of that matters from the aspect of results. If we don't get the energy balance right, you don't get results. You can be walking 10,000 steps a day, doing runs, doing everything else. If you don't get the energy balance right, forget about it. You won't get the results. So that's your fundamental in terms of fat loss. In terms of weight training, lifting weights at the correct stimulus with the right amount of tension, with the right amount of intensity is the first step. But where you can take the next step is your nutrition. So people underestimate the value of the nutrition. So everything that I talk about in terms of discipline later on, and all of the different bits that are relative to fat loss, they're as relative to muscle growth, if not even more so, because while I said the fat loss process is simple, obviously it's hard to adhere to, the muscle growth process is hard. So you have to get your nutrition on top of it as well to help push them numbers a little bit more. So let's have a look at the buy-in first of all. The reason why you'll be here is because you get results. Okay. So this is all of you guys. So what these blocks represent is the last 4 we've done. So these were all last year, block 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to highlight at the very beginning what happened and then what changed and how these numbers started to grow. So just first off, a lot of people will ask, this number is how much weight you lost as a group. So this is 34.8 kilos, which was lost by the group in the first block. This one actually had the most people in it. So you would think usually when there's more people, it will result in more weight loss. But what we've done over the last 4 blocks is we've made it better. The fundamental is the same, but the method has changed. So as I've changed the method, this is why you see the change in results. So step 1, it was making sure you're doing your calories, providing the education, and obviously then looking at getting results. 34.8 kilos is still a fantastic achievement, but why settle? You can always get a little bit more. This number down here is the average loss per person. So that's very important because you want to make sure that your individual is getting better within the group. So like more people will obviously equal a more loss if that's the natural way of going. But if our average is growing, we know our method is also improving. So next step, less people, more of a weight drop and a higher average. What did we change? I added in some optional methods. I didn't enforce it. I added in optionally purposely to then be able to provide the data to be able to make it a mandatory method. So what that method was, I'll go over in a few seconds, but it shows the highlights of importance of one small change can make a big jump. So we went from a 5 kilo jump to nearly a 15 kilo jump on that, with increasing our average from 2.9 to 3.5. What I added in there was very simple. It was just progress pictures. That was all it was. Here, I gave people the option. Most people didn't do it. Here, I made it mandatory, and look at the results jump. Why that is the case is the same reason as why you showed up today. It's about intent. It's about how serious you take yourself, and I'll go into that later on. But it's all about intent with nutrition because it's a mental game. It's not about the physical aspect of it. It's about how do we do this day in, day out. So we've been able to then increase these numbers quite exponentially. And then you'll see most recently 66.7 with an average of 3.9. So that's fantastic. Realistically, there is going to be a ceiling to that average. You're not going to get somebody to go from 3.9 kilo average. You're not going to bring that up to 6-7 kilos. It's quite unrealistic. But as we can keep improving it, we're also trying to get more for you guys. Another reason why these numbers here total are growing is because when the method changed, the adherence changed. So there's a lot more dropouts here, less dropouts. Nearly everybody finished the block this time around. And it's all down to the method. It's down to having the principles in place to make sure that you can succeed, essentially. I've changed the methods again this time. I've made it a little bit more so orientated. So I'm expecting this to be increased quite significantly. This hopefully as well, but it's not going to be a massive jump again. So this is results on you guys. So obviously well done to that. Here's our method. The method is non-negotiable for the reasons I've just stated, the results. Why would I allow you to do something that's going to give you less and also give you a higher chance of failure? So that's why the method is non-negotiable. So step one is logging your calories. If you don't log your calories, it's guesswork. And if I don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're doing. Like, being 100% honest, I've been logging my calories for the last 10 years consistently. I would struggle to do it completely freehand by myself. I would get a good gauge of it. So for somebody who hasn't been doing it consistently, you basically have very little chance of being very successful in doing that. So logging calories is step one. The reason why: first, for your total energy balance to get the results; second, for what's in them calories; and then third, how can I give you feedback if I can't see it? And you'll tell me the good, generally you won't tell me the bad, or you'll forget the bad because you don't want to think about it. So having the logs is very essential for that. Second is weigh-ins Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning. That's important for a couple of reasons. First, for adherence, so we know that what we're doing is working. Second, weight can fluctuate. Weight isn't the be all and end all of the time. So for example, on Sunday night, if I eat my dinner at 9:30, I weigh in on Monday, I haven't gone to the toilet, my weight could be up. On my next, if I was only weighing myself once a week, I think, oh, well, last week was a waste of time. I didn't make progress. But I could weigh myself on the Wednesday when things are a bit more normal and I get a more accurate results. But if I have 3 weigh-ins throughout the week, there's less chance of disruption from something that isn't actually true, because your weight can fluctuate quite significantly. So that's why we weigh 3 times a week. But it also gives me an idea. If I see, for example, let's just say we have somebody who's at 100 kg on Monday, then on Wednesday they're 99.5, on Friday they're 99.3, and then on Monday they're 100 again. And I look at their logs and their logs say it's perfect. I'm like, well, this consistently keeps happening, that they lose weight during the week. On Monday they keep coming up higher. Odds are their weekend is an issue. So that's where I can highlight the issue. And then if you're not getting results, and I say, what's the consistency here? And then I'm like, is this weekend 100% accurate? And then generally that's where the first things fall, and that's how we get results. So that's why 3 is important. Next, progress pictures before, midway through, and after. So this is one people don't like doing. I don't like doing it, but it increases your chance of success by quite a margin. So what this basically does is, because you want to always have a couple of goals in your mind. Weight loss is one for health. Then everybody has other goals outside. That could be fat loss for aesthetics. It could be for overall performance, whatever it is. You don't want to only associate what your progress is with just your weight number and constantly relying on a number on the scales. A lot of people will develop a bad relationship with the scales because of that, because of years of constantly hoping it goes down, it goes down. But the reason, if we add in other metrics, other things to focus on, it gives you that extra edge, and it gives you more things to notice your progress. And then therefore it also adds more adherence. If you've got them coming at the start and then in the middle, at the end, you will want to make a difference. So that makes you, again, more adherent. Then another one is measurements. So this is just body measurements. This is measuring your arm, chest, hips, waist, everything like that. and that'll give you again another representation of your progress. Then in the other side of things, for those who are aspiring to grow muscle growth, that'll obviously be the same thing. If you see your arm size increasing, quad size increasing, if that's one of your goals, that's another representation of that. Then this is new. So this is where I want more on the adherence side. So while the results have been great, they can be better, and we can always strive to do a little bit more on it. And if I add in this check-in form, it gives me a chance to give you more feedback. It gives you a chance to kind of evaluate how your week has gone, and it allows us to make the changes we need to make rather than being 3 weeks in and not having evaluated where we're at, and then we're struggling when I'm giving you the feedback halfway through. So originally I'd give you feedback on the middle halfway point and then at the end. Now it's going to be a little bit different. So we have week one, we'll have an educational week, which is where I'm giving you a topic to focus on. So the first one is going to be macronutrients, what's important in there. There's detail, not just as basic as carbs, proteins, and fats. It shows you why it's important to hit this balance, what types of carbs, proteins, and fats to be eating, and it gives you an idea to start experimenting with what you're having. But then week two is going to be a feedback week. Then week three is educational. Week four, feedback. Week five, educational. Week six, feedback. So there's a lot of feedback touch points. That way I can identify if you're not getting results, I can tell you exactly why. If you're having adherence issues, if you're having issues with actually doing it, it gives us a way easier chance of identifying. So that's what we've changed this time around to get a little bit more. So this check-in form is going to be on the same app you log your workouts on. What that app will basically have is at the end of the week, you go to the form. I have a couple of questions for you in there. It's basically looking for some information on how your week has gone. And then when I'm looking at your feedback, I already have the answers. It also allows me to give you more structured approaches. If I'm asking you a question and you're saying, how are you finding your calories, for example, on a scale of 1 to 10, was it difficult, whatever these metrics are. If I see you're struggling in week one, week two, I can contact you. We can make some changes. It adds that extra element to it. So that form will be on the app. When you guys are finished today, I'm going to be emailing you about how to do it, how to fill it all in. So don't worry about that. But the questions there are basically designed to help you, but it's self-evaluation. If you're on a Sunday night, you fill it in and you're answering these questions. Did you stick to the plan? No. If you fill that out 6 times in a row, you're going to make a change. You're going to want to do it before it gets to the end of it. And if I can say, if you're filling out no on your check-in form, you're not sticking to your plan, we're 3 weeks in, what are we doing? We need to step it up and go from there. So just add that intervention in it. So discipline and consistency. So nutrition is purely a discipline game. Like anything, like exercise, motivation will get you maybe one session. It might get you here today, but if you don't act upon it, you're not going to get anything. So the first thing to look at is, where do you show consistency? The reason I have that question up there is because with nutrition, you'll have people who could be first time around and they nail it and it's great, but you can have sometimes people who are at it 10 years and they still haven't gotten it. So then technically, if you were to ask that person, are you consistent? They say no. So then you have to look at, where are you consistent in your day-to-day? Where are you consistent in your life? If you ask anybody, did you show up for work consistently this week? They're usually going to say yes. And if they didn't, there's obviously a consequence and they're not showing up. So that's the reason why they do it. But we have to start looking at that, saying, why are we only applying consistency to things that aren't related directly to you, in the sense of, this is going to be so much better for you in terms of your health, in terms of your confidence, in terms of your relationship with food, your long-term longevity in terms of your food choices for the next 10 to 20 years. So why not prioritize yourself the same way you prioritize work? Why not do something for yourself that you're doing for somebody else anyway? You're showing up every single day for somebody else. Again, I know people get paid, this is their job, this is the way you're living, but why not do something and apply that same attitude to this? You've got 6 weeks. Why can't you show up every day for yourself? Yeah, that's the first mindset shift that I would start to look at and start to question, is what's important to you? Is this going to be something that you really want to do? So what do you want? So again, you ask people what they want, they'll say fat loss a lot of the time. Generally, you will obviously get that throughout the process of this, but people will always want to get more and more and more, which is good, but you want to get to a point then that you're happy with. So what people essentially want is to get to a weight or body fat percentage that they're happy with, that makes them feel confident, that makes them feel good, and that they feel healthy at. So that is going to be the end goal. That goal becomes less achievable the more times you fail. So if you ask somebody, how many times have you been trying to do this? And they say, I've been trying for 10 years. So that person, what we need to now do is get that person rewired to understand that you can achieve this, you can get this goal. How do we do that? We follow a method. By doing what you've always done, you'll never get a different result. So if you keep starting something for 2 weeks and then saying, look, I'm too busy, I can't do it, I don't have enough time. If you've been doing that for 10 years, what's going to change and when is it going to change? So that's what you have to start looking at. What do you want? How are you going to do it? I'm showing you the method. This has worked so many times. I've done this in this gym. I've done it for the last 10 years with people. It will work. You just have to do it. That's the main thing. You have to apply yourself and say, I'm number one here. I'm prioritizing myself to get to this goal. I have to make the changes. I can't do what I've done the last 10 times when I failed, which is telling me that you're too busy. There's nobody in this room today, if I was to ask you, are you too busy? Nobody's going to say, I'm not busy, I don't do anything. Nobody's going to say that. Everybody has different challenges. Some people that'll be work related. Some people might have kids, might have 2 young kids running around and you think, geez, I'm so busy, I'm so tired. you have to look at it and say, this is my situation. This is the hand that I've been dealt. I have to make time. I have to prioritize this. Where do I lose something? Because if you don't make a change, you're not going to change. That's very simple. If you come into this thinking for the next 6 weeks, you're going to do what you've been doing for the last year, the last 6 months, whatever it is, you will not change. We have to make the changes. So yes, we're all busy, but you have to understand that's not an excuse. That's not a reason to stop. You can make it work. So we'll go over that as we go through the process, but it's very important to understand that. So then, why are you doing it? Are you doing it for health? Are you doing it for aesthetics? Whatever your goal is, understand your why. Sometimes people do it for others. Like they might say, look, I want to run around my kids a little bit more. I want to feel a bit better. I want to feel more confident in that. Or they might say, I want to feel more confident in my clothes. I want to feel more confident when I go on holiday. There's loads of different reasons, but understand your why. Remind yourself of that. Anytime you say, I don't want to log my calories, I don't want to up my weight, I've done these things wrong. Why are you doing this? Keep reminding yourself of that for the next 6 weeks, because that goal won't go away. The goal should be achieved. You shouldn't be setting that to fail. You want to make sure that I understand my why, and that's what's going to keep you going. So the next thing is the impact on you and others around you. So it's important to understand the next thing I'm going to say. These are statistics. This isn't formed opinion. It's just something to understand that the impact of what you do, what it has around others that you live with, others that you see day to day. So first thing we'll look at is if you're living with a partner. If, for example, you're going to commit to these next 6 weeks, which you guys are obviously going to do, we have to communicate in the sense of saying, look, your chances of success, they aren't completely reliant on your partner, but they definitely have an impact. So in that situation, you want to say, look, communicate, this is what I'm doing, and whatever old habits you have. So what I'm basically saying is, let's say, for example, for the last 6 months, you've been getting a takeaway every single Friday and Saturday. If your partner keeps doing that in front of you every Friday and Saturday, it's going to be a little bit harder for you. So what I'm trying to say is try communicate in the sense of saying, look, this is important to me. This is my goal. I want to prioritize this for the next 6 weeks. So just so they understand where you're coming from. I'm not saying they have to change their behaviors, but it's important for you to communicate that to give them a chance to allow to help you. What generally happens, that's the negative, is the positive. So you'll find that in most cases, if one person in a relationship or partnership makes a change, it actually has a direct impact on the other person. They start to make changes and they start to see positive affirmation, even though they're not taking part in the same plan. Just by changing foods, because a lot of times you eat similar things, it does make a difference. The next one is about kids. So in the situation for anyone who has kids, because I know a lot of people do, and a lot of people in their goals, when I speak to them, they say they're doing this for their kids. They want to get fitter, they want to feel healthier, they want to be able to be there for their kids and feel healthier with that. Just on the stats, what they've done, I was looking at a meta-analysis on 6 million different people. So that's across a load of different studies. They find that if a parent has poor eating habits and they aren't in a healthier weight range, the kid is 20 to 30% more likely to follow in their footsteps. And then if both parents are in that, the kid is 10 to 12 times more likely to follow in their footsteps. So the reason I say that is because, going back to the why, because a lot of people have said to me they're doing this for their kids. It's important to understand the impact that it has if we don't make the changes that we need to make, and the changes that you want to make. So it's important to think about that. Now, I understand you're doing this for yourself, but the reason I'm giving you this statistic is because I want you to have the best chance, and I want you to understand why you're doing it, and it keeps you disciplined in times where you may not want to, and that's how we get the long-term success. So then lastly is potential. So this one is more about individually in the sense of what you think you can achieve and where you want to be. But all of you wouldn't be here if I didn't believe in the potential that you have. So in terms of those of you that I've known for longer, the potential that I can see in you, because I've seen it in others do it, is quite high. And a lot of people don't see that in themselves because they've never achieved it before. But all of you in here have so much potential to achieve these results. For those of you that are new, obviously I don't know you too well right now, but I wouldn't have you in the gym if I didn't believe that I can make you better or get to the goal that you want to. And that's the big thing to understand, that you guys have so much potential to get to a level where you want to. You can all achieve the goals that you want. It's very important that you start to realize that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when you start to do the right things. And this is the first step in doing that. Now, the gym will look after itself, because it's very hard to get away with a lot in here. If you're going to be lifting very lightly, we'll obviously come over to you and we can lift you heavier. But this is something that when you go home, you have to make the right decisions, and you have to start thinking about that potential. What happens if you do it? What happens if you do actually follow through this time? And what happens when you get them results? What is that going to matter? What's that going to mean to you? Are you going to feel more confident? Are you going to feel healthier? Whatever that is, that's what I want you guys to start to realize, because you have a lot of potential. You have more in the tank. There's a lot more for you to achieve. Now it's just about taking action on that. And that's why it's important to then work on our discipline throughout the block. So execution, how do you do this? There's 3 things you got to do. So communication, if you're struggling and you don't tell me, I can't help you. So you have to communicate. If there's something you don't know, if there's something you're unsure of, if there's something that you're struggling with, tell me. If you don't tell me, I can't help you. And then usually the problem becomes too late, and I get this big long message on WhatsApp, usually around 10 o'clock at night. Sorry for wasting your time, Eamon. It's this, and this. I don't want that to happen to any of you. I want you to tell me when you're struggling, so that way I can help you. There's always a solution. So you're never too far gone. I would rather, if you didn't log your food for the week, what a lot of people tend to do, rather than just talking to me, they feel like it's normal. They'll feel embarrassed. They'll say, "Oh, Aim, look, I don't want to waste your time. Didn't log anything this week. I'll try again next time." That's what I want to avoid. You don't need to do that. If you don't get it right for 1 week, there's 6 weeks. You can get it right 5 other times. 5 times being correct is better than none. Yep. So we want to make sure that we communicate if you are struggling. Prioritization, that comes down to you. You have to prioritize yourself. If you don't prioritize yourself, at some point, the things that you do prioritize will take control. What that means is it can be work, it can be social life, it can be whatever it is. You can prioritize others. If you don't prioritize yourself, whatever the other things that are above that are going to take control. And that's what's going to ultimately lead to then busyness or not logging or going over calories, whatever it is. Preparation. So preparation is very important. If you are in a position where this is very common, so one time we had somebody struggle in the last block because when they go into work provided lunches, but the lunches were really unhealthy, really high in calories, and they didn't know how to log it. So I basically very simply said, what is more important to you, the money that you're going to save on the lunches that you get for free, or your progress? And then they were like, my progress. And I was like, so why are we having this discussion? And people don't think about that. They're just thinking, oh, well, the only option I have in front of me is the food that's there for free. I'm just going to take it, and it's easier for me, so I don't have to prep food. But then what did he do? He prepped the food, got really good results, feels a lot better, has continued that progress as we go through. So preparation, that's a very simple example, but preparation could also be doing your food shop on a Sunday, so that way you obviously have the right food in the house. It could be another thing of saying to yourself, right, it's if there's foods that you generally are really high in calories that are in your food press all the time, it's very hard to say no every single day or sometimes multiple times a day. Whereas if you just say no once in the supermarket, it's very easy to then know, okay, I'm at home, I don't have that option. Now, I'm not saying you can't eat unhealthy things. Of course you can. I actually encourage you to obviously have them in moderation, but it's very important that the food shop is generally what you need to be eating as a whole, because obviously there has to be a change in that. So those are 3 things to focus on. So misconceptions of what doesn't work. So obviously I've shown you the method that we've used has been very successful. I've shown you what we need to do to follow that method, and we obviously have our process in place. Now we have to get rid of any fog, because I'm aware everybody's on social media, everybody has heard different things, you've been in different gyms, you've been in different areas, you see different articles, so many different things come up. So I'm going to get rid of the most common ones that I could think of and get rid of that fog, so that you guys know exactly what you're dealing with. So spot reduction, what that means is losing fat in a certain area. So some people say, I just want to lose fat in my stomach. It doesn't work like that. You will lose fat from wherever your body decides. It's a genetic thing. Your body will store fat wherever it feels it's safest to do so. So it will also lose fat. So wherever, for example, it's most dangerous is generally where your body will lose it first. So for example, weight around the stomach, around your organs, your body will lose it first. It might come last in your arms, for example. It doesn't matter. It's genetic. So it can be very hard to know when it's going to go from different people. So if you're coming to me, oh, I just want to lose fat in my arms, it doesn't work like that. You can't choose where. It just, your body will decide that. Stubborn fat, that's not a thing. Stubborn fat is just fat you haven't lost yet. So that's very simply that. There's nothing special about it. It just means you got to do it for longer. That's all that is. Yeah. So juice diets, I just threw that in there because, yeah, not any of you have ever said it to me, but in a gym I used to work in for a long time, came quite frequently. So juice diets is where people just have only juice for a period of time, and they then lose a load of weight, and then they go back to their old habits, and they just gain the weight back, because when you're not eating anything, of course you're going to lose weight, but then that's not a sustainable approach. Now, this, of course, people with juice diets, they'll lose the weight, but like I was saying, they haven't changed any habits, they haven't learned anything, they haven't done the right stuff to actually build sustainable progress, so it's not going to work. So trying anything that sounds too good to be true is generally the case. Fat burners, so again, if you've ever been told to buy like a little pill that's a fat burner, it's not going to work, so just don't do that. Very simply. And then water weight. So water weight, like I was saying, is a thing. Like, for example, like I was saying, the example, if I had a really high carb dinner on a Sunday and I had it late at night, carbs hold water in your body. The next day I wake up, my weight could be higher than it actually should be in terms of what it actually is, but then the next few days your water weight will level out. So that's one example. If you've eaten foods that are really high in salt and sodium, you're going to have higher water retention. So these things all matter because your weigh-ins will be distributed better. So that can happen. So don't panic if something jumps unexpectedly. If you keep consistent to your plan, that will be fine. It'll come down over time. Where water weight isn't the case is it's happened multiple times where we 2-3 weeks in and somebody isn't logging correctly and they tell me, oh, it's probably just holding on to water. water weight doesn't last 3 weeks. So it's usually 1 or 2 weigh-ins. It's never a long period of time. So if you're not losing weight sustainably over 2-3 weeks time, don't blame water. It's the plan. Sorry, it's not the plan. It's the following of the plan. So getting bulky. This isn't really anything to do with nutrition, but I just always throw it in. People will say, I don't want to get bulky when they lift weights. Look at me. This is 10 years of trying my best to get bulky. So it's a very slow process. Building muscle is not, it takes so long. And like, it's one of the hardest things you can possibly do. So don't worry. When you lift weights, you have a high protein diet, don't text me in a few weeks saying, I don't want to get bulky. It's not going to happen. It's a really, really hard thing to achieve. Eating late at night causes fat gain. You can eat whenever you want to eat. If it's within your calories, you'll get the results. Doesn't matter. There's no difference. The negative of eating late at night is that if you eat before you go to bed, it's not great because then your body has to digest the food as you're sleeping, so your quality of sleep is affected. So that's one negative, but it doesn't mean you're going to gain weight by it. So you can eat whenever you want. Like a lot of people ask, like after 6 p.m. I don't know why 6 p.m., but some people think that you can eat after that time. It's going to cause fat gain. Doesn't matter. The balance of the calories is all that matters in that. Building muscle regarding weight change. So the reason that's there is because as you're in the gym, you're obviously building muscle, building strength. But some people, if their weight isn't coming down, they think that the rate at which they're building muscle is the same at which they're losing weight. It's not the case. Building muscle is really slow. It can be like 0.2 kilograms per month sometimes if you're doing it really well. You can lose like 2 kilograms per month. The average is completely different. So your weight gain is never caused by muscle mass, and the reason your weight's not going down isn't because you're building muscle at the same rate you're losing fat. That'd be phenomenal, but it's not possible. And then this one, a lot of people believe this to be true, and it might shock a few people when they hear it for the first time, but metabolism slowed down with age. So you would be surprised. You hear people say, oh, they could be 55, and they say, when I was in my 20s, I could eat whatever I want, and I didn't gain weight. But then there could be 20-year-olds sitting beside them. So it's about understanding that your metabolism slows down at a very, very, very slow rate. So the difference between a 55-year-old versus a 20-year-old is not massive in terms of metabolism. You're not going to have such a difference in the sense that that's the reason for your weight gain. The reason why somebody at 55 might gain weight that they didn't gain when they were 20, eating a similar amount of food, is purely down to activity. So people move less as they get older. So it's no harder to lose weight in, say, for example, in your 40s versus your 20s in terms of metabolism wise. The reason why it can be harder is because of activity and muscle mass retention and different things like that. So it's about what you do in that. So it's not this sudden thing that your metabolism is now suddenly way lower than it was in your 20s. It's actually down to your activity rate and then how you actually act and what you've done in the last few years. So in the case of people lifting weights in here, you guys are going to be okay. Where you see a massive drop off in metabolism is after 60, because bone density and muscle mass fly down then as people are becoming sedentary. So obviously you're all here, you're all in the gym. That won't happen to you as long as you're consistently lifting weights. But it's important to understand to not blame your metabolism for the reason why you're gaining weight. The reason why we're gaining weight is either we're not moving as much as we were or we're eating too much. It's down to that. In terms of what can cause your metabolism to drop is, for example, menopause. But the reason that happens is because people don't lift weights, they don't exercise. It's obviously a bit harder, but it's important to understand that when the negative side effects kick in, you want to obviously combat that with lifting weights, training, and building that bone density muscle mass back up. So the reason I have these up here as well is very similarly to the last slide. So here's illness and influencing factors. So these are genuine factors that will actually influence fat loss and muscle gain, a few different things. So PCOS, hormone imbalance. When hormone imbalance, that's insulin resistance, and thyroid dysfunction and type 2 diabetes. Very, very rare, a lot of them. And if anybody does have any of these, obviously let me know. But these are just factors in the game. They don't change the rules. The same principle applies. It's an energy balance. We just have to, it's an added challenge. Try look at it like that. It's an added challenge. It definitely plays a role in the process, but it isn't the determining factor. If somebody, for example, has any of these issues, it's just about combating it and understanding, well, this is a challenge we have to now deal with. It's not about saying, well, that's the reason why I can't do it. Yeah. Then indirect. So the reason these are indirect is because, like I was saying, for example, the menopause, if people are starting to struggle to lose weight when they go to the menopause, because if they're not lifting weights and they're not increasing their muscle mass and they're allowing the bone density to drop, they're allowing the muscle mass to drop. So then their metabolism is going down, meaning that they have to eat way less because their energy levels are going to be, or sorry, their activity levels are going to be lower. That makes it obviously a factor, but you guys are obviously going to combat that by training. And then medications. So there are some medications, they don't cause weight gain in the sense of taking the medication and you put on weight. What some of them do is they increase the hormone that signals hunger, and it means that you will eat more. So when you eat more, you gain weight. So it's not, the medication isn't directly causing the weight gain. It's the action of the hormone that's signaling the hunger that's causing that. So there's a couple of different medications that have that. So if there's any medication that you guys are obviously on that you need to let me know, that's of course what we'll talk about privately. Okay. So next we're going to move on to muscle growth impactful factors. So I've broken this down to tiers. It doesn't mean that these aren't as important as these, but there's no point in talking about this if you don't have this correct, if that makes sense. So tier one, total daily protein intake and total energy intake. So if you aren't hitting your total daily protein intake, that is the biggest factor in muscle growth. So if, for example, we're not getting this right and you're trying to focus on all these things, we're wasting our time. That's the most determining factors. That's what we need to do. So 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram. You don't have to worry about that. I'm going to do that for you. But I just put that in there just as a rough gauge of understanding what it is that you actually need. And then total energy intake. So when I'm calculating your calories, I'm calculating them in a way where we have, this is what you need to keep your weight the same. This is what gets us a deficit. If I made that way less, your weight will come down quite a lot, but your energy levels are going to be poor. Your body's ability to grow more tissue is going to be poor. Your exercise performance is going to be poor. So that's why I don't go too low. So if I give you a number, let's just say that number is 1,600 calories, and you start to eat 1,100 calories, you go, oh, this is great, I'm losing a lot of weight. Your sustainability is going to suffer, and also your performance is going to suffer. Your like everything in your body is going to suffer because you're obviously eating too little. So that's why it's important to stick to the energy intake that I give you, because it's done based around your activity. I've taken everything into account, and that's what's sustainable for you to make proper progress over a long period of time. Next is protein quality. So I don't believe anyone here is vegan or vegetarian, but if you are, tell me. I'm going to try to convince you not to be. But basically, plant protein isn't the same as protein from meat. So, for example, if I had 100 grams of plant protein and I had 100 grams of protein through like chicken or whey protein, whatever it is, there's amino acids in that. The profile is not the same, so your body's absorption rate isn't the same. So you're not absorbing as much of it, and it's not as usable in muscle protein synthesis, which is then responsible for muscle growth. So it's a little bit harder. So, for example, being a vegan or being on the vegetarian diet and having the plant proteins, you have to be even extra careful on the protein. But if anyone is on that, tell me, and I can obviously help you, but hopefully no one. Protein distribution across the day. So what that means is if I said to you, if you eat 100 grams of protein and you fire on a kilo of chicken and you eat the protein all in one go, it's fine. It's not ideal. But if you have this in doses across the day, because your body will then use it as you're recovering from your workouts across the day. So it's a bit better to have it maybe 4 meals across the day or 3 meals across the day. Now, I'd rather you, if you need to have a bigger meal where one of them has like 60 grams, for example, and the rest of them are smaller, that's okay. But just try to distribute it across the day because it's shown better results in recovery when muscle growth is concerned. Then carbohydrate availability. So when I give you your calories, that's the first thing to focus on because that's your result. Second is your carbs, proteins, and fats. So while protein is important, like we just discussed, if you don't hit your carb percentage, if I give you a 40% carb hit and you're getting 30%, it means the availability of energy is low. And that means that will then have an impact somewhere. So that is either going to be in fullness, in gym performance, in day-to-day performance, in fatigue. So it's important that you pay attention to that. It's important to understand that if anyone believes that carbs make you fat, they don't. It's nonsense. But it's just important to understand they're very, very important for your overall energy and your long-term sustainability. So having them is going to be a direct factor in your muscle growth. The reason for that is if you come in here and your carbs are really low, your energy is really low, odds are your session is not going to go well. So that's a big, big factor in it. And then lastly, these three. So fat intake. So that is for hormone regulation. So it's very important to make sure that fats have really, really good micronutrient profiles. So it's important to not just look at them and say, oh, well, fats are really dense in calories, I'm not going to have them. The word itself makes people think that if you eat fats, you get fat. Not the case. Calories do that. So fats are really good for your hormone regulation. They're really good for your micronutrients. There's a lot of good stuff in them. So it's important that we balance that out. And that's why when I give you fat percentages, what I see a lot of the time is people avoid having them. So it's important that you do have them because they do play a factor in recovery as well, and a lot of other things in your physiology. Then meal timing. What meal timing means is what do you do before you train, what do you do after you train. So for example, if you go to work at 9 a.m. and you've had porridge in the morning and then you've a banana for lunch and then you come here at 7 p.m., do you think you're appropriately fueled to then work out? No. So trying to have something there to make sure you're appropriately fueled before you come. If you have a big bowl of pasta with meatballs 20 minutes before you come here, is that going to make you feel good? No. So it's both ways. Too little obviously isn't good, but too much in the window of time that's too small is obviously going to have a negative impact as well. So we want to make sure that you're appropriately fueled for your workouts, and then obviously appropriately fueled throughout the day, but generally that you're coming in here and you're coming at the right time. So I'll help you with that with the education piece. I'll tell you how long to eat before, what types of food to eat before. There's different types of carbohydrates you can have depending on the time frame before and after. And then afterwards, it's higher protein mixed with carbohydrates. It just increases the absorption rate, and then it makes it easier for body again from a recovery aspect, and it gives you a little advantage there too. Then hydration and micronutrients. So micronutrients play a big role, which I'll go over later on in the supplements part as well, because we might supplement a few of them depending on people's diets. But micronutrients play a massive role in your day-to-day function, so it's very important that we pay attention to them as well. But at the beginning, I'll tell you when the time is to really nail down on them. And then alcohol. So it's not something to start consuming, but it's more so if, for example, you have a really good session today in the gym and then you go home and drink a bottle of wine, the recovery is massively impacted. It really, really slows down muscle growth. So on days that you train, at least try to not drink alcohol, because your body doesn't just recover 10 minutes after the session. It usually takes a couple of days. But in the first 24 hours, particularly, if you consume alcohol, the effectiveness of that workout is really, really affected. There's not really, it's very hard to give an exact statistic or percentage, but it's very, very significant. So if I have a really good session in here every Friday and then I head and have a few drinks, the effectiveness of that session is going to be impacted depending on the window of time, obviously, but try to avoid that when you can. It's not to avoid alcohol as a whole. If you enjoy it, great, but it's just more so on the same day as you're training. So fueling. So fuel performance as performance drives the outcome. If you come in here poorly fueled every single time and your session output is really poor, the results you're going to get from them sessions are going to be impacted by that. If you come in here appropriately fueled and then have a good performance in your sessions, then of course you'll do better. We'll obviously help you with that, but it's very important that when you're here, we'll always try to get the most out of you, but it's important that you give yourself the chance for us to squeeze that. So that's how we make sure we're fueled appropriately. So main fuel source, like I talked about, is carbohydrates. Very simply, poor performance means less effective outcome. And then poor fueling equals poor energy levels equals harder tasks. So don't only think of fueling between gym, think of fueling as if you're in work and you haven't fueled appropriately and you say you've only had breakfast at 9 a.m. and it's 5 p.m. and you're starving, the chances of you making a bad decision there are so much higher than if you had a proper lunch with appropriate foods and appropriate fueling for earlier in the day. So try to think of it as, when is it that you struggle and why is it that you struggle? And if you are appropriately fueled and you're eating the right amount of foods at the right time, it'll put you in the position then to last longer, and you'll obviously get a more sustainable approach to this nutrition. So next, you have supplements. So these are, if you aren't doing everything else that I've just said, you don't really want to be going to your supplements, because if you can't get control of your overall normal intake, there's no point in you trying to supplement things. So this is more so when you have control of all of your bits, then you come to your supplements. So these are the ones, because you'll see so many different supplements. These are the only ones that I would recommend that are actually effective and that actually have a purpose. Everything else, it's individualized in the sense that, like, some people say they might be supplementing iron. That's different. That can be for medical reason. I'm just talking about general supplements that aren't to do with medical intervention. So omega-3s, they've done a lot of recent research on omega-3s, and they've actually found significant increases in muscle growth, in strength, in inflammation, in a lot of different factors affecting exercise. I'm not going to give you the exact numbers because it's one study, but for example, in that study, I'll give you this number. They found an increase of leg strength of 15% for those who were supplementing omega-3s versus those who weren't. And it wasn't funded by a company that supply omega-3s, which is important because a lot of the time the studies that are showing really good results of a supplement are funded by that company. But it's very early days, but they're a really good supplement take if you don't get it in the diet. Omega-3's absorption rate from supplements isn't as high as it is from food. So salmon, mackerel, them type of foods are high in omega-3. Try them in the diet, obviously. But then if we aren't getting it and you consistently log your calories, I can see your stuff. If I think you need to supplement this, I can obviously recommend it. Creatine, everybody should take creatine. You can take that straight away. You should take that every single day. There's benefits outside of exercise. They found more cognitive function. They found heart health. There's a load of different benefits outside of exercise. What it does from an exercise standpoint, it increases performance. Imagine when you're at the end of the program, you're lifting 3 reps. That's when creatine is most effective, when you're working at your maximum capacity, because it's supplying a higher amount of creatine to the body, meaning your body can supply it more regularly to your muscles as you're training, gives you a higher impact, increases strength, increases muscle mass. When you take creatine, there is a slight increase in water retention. It's not bad. Water weight is not a bad thing, but it's only very slight, and it's only in the first week, because then after that it's regulated and stays the same. So you just have to stay consistent with it. But men, women, everyone, if you can, take creatine. It's very effective. Vitamin D3, because of where we are today, is not a good example of that, but in Ireland, people don't get enough vitamin D because of the sun. Vitamin D3 is effective for muscle growth and different things like that, but also vitamin D anyway is general. We're quite low in, so if we're going to supplement it, that's one. Whey protein and clear whey. The reason that's up there is purely for convenience purposes. It's not like protein from chicken will always be better than protein from whey, for example. You always want to have the natural element to it. Why whey can help is because, let's say, for example, you're at the end of your day, you realize you're 20 grams short in protein and it's 8 o'clock at night. You don't want to go cooking up a whole dinner. Having the convenience of having it there is very easy. It goes really well with breakfast cereals, if you want to put whey protein in with porridge, for example, very easy. It just adds convenience to the diet. And protein is one that people are generally quite low in. So having it as a supplement and having it around is good. It's not a reliance though. So you'll have some people then, like last time, there was somebody who was having 3 scoops of protein a day and they were getting 75 grams of their 100 grams of protein just through whey. It's a very expensive way of doing it. And also, literally, it's not sustainable. So it's not going to last. So there's no point in doing that. It's used as something to help you. It's not something to rely on. And then lastly, caffeine. So caffeine will give you enhanced performance when you train. I personally don't do it. It is very effective though. The reason I don't do it is because I purely rely on the food to fuel it, but you'll get really significant results with it. I only recommend that though if you're performing at quite a high level that you're consistently hitting. But I don't recommend you guys now all start firing coffee into the system and coming in here. But it will enhance performance on days that you might be more fatigued. But that's just the supplements that I would recommend. For those of you who are just starting with nutrition, you don't really need to talk about them right now. It's more when you start to clean up the diet a bit and get the kind of sustainable approach before we add them in. For those of you who've done these blocks a couple of times, a bit more advanced, these are the ones that we look at, but I'll individually message you on which ones you should or shouldn't have and why. And we go from there. Okay, that is everything. So appreciate you guys listening to me. Now, at this point, a lot of people can find it a bit awkward to ask questions, so don't feel at all, because generally the question that you're thinking about, there's probably 3 or 4 other people thinking about it. So if anybody has any questions, you can fire away. Good. Yeah. Yeah. So you're using MyFitnessPal? Okay. So I haven't actually heard of that one. Yeah, yeah. But basically, we're just going to use MyFitnessPal. The only reason for that is because I probably should have mentioned that's a good question. So MyFitnessPal is what we're going to use to track the calories. The reason we use MyFitnessPal is because I can see everything you do on it. So that's the basic reason of it. The other ones, I haven't heard of that one. That might have it. The only thing is when you download MyFitnessPal, it's going to get you to try subscribe for €12 a month. You don't need to do that. Just keep it as the normal as the base. It's just logging your calories. Like for example, I think the premium I think gives you a barcode scanner, but you can just look up a banana on the thing and it'll tell you a banana and it'll give you different gauges, small, medium, large. You pick whichever one. But yeah, we'll use MyFitnessPal. But in the email, I'll also send this out to you and I'll tell you how to add me as a friend on there. And I'll tell you then that way I can view all of your logs so that what time comes to feedback and you're asking me questions, I can see what you're doing so I can tell you, here's the issue. Mary, you had a question? Yeah. Yeah, so let's just say, for example, if your goal is just to maintain your current level of strength, and let's say if your diet didn't have enough protein, you can actually depreciate over time because you're not giving enough for recovery. So let's just say if you're somebody who's they're here and they're kind of like, I'm happy with where I'm at, and like I'm obviously training as I'm going through, but if you don't have enough protein to recover, what actually ends up happening is your body has to regress. So it goes from there. So it's important for preservation as well as growth. Yeah. Yeah. So you can like when I give you a protein, and also protein isn't only for muscle growth, hair, skin, nails, loads of things your body cells, it uses a lot. But yeah, no, you need to be sticking to that amount. Yeah. Any other questions? Go ahead, Brian. Current. But I will like formulas are good, but I'll take into account that I know exactly what you're doing in training. So for example, um, a client that I used to have a few years ago, at the time we started training, he was 170 kilograms. So the amount of protein that he would have had based off the formula would have been outrageous to achieve. So in that circumstance, I obviously change it, but I will obviously calculate it for you, and then I'll take into account where we're at and what level of training you're at, and then I go from there. But yeah, basically, I have to evaluate. Any other questions? Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. So if you were coming in here at 8 p.m. and you fire a lot of caffeine into you, that's not a good thing because you're going to go home, you're going to struggle to sleep. You're also going to have a poor quality of sleep. So generally, it takes 12 hours for it to get properly out of your system. So try to not have it late at night if you are coming here late at night. And like I was saying, if you're going to use it as supplementation, maybe ask us first, just because if you're at the beginning stage of your workouts, you don't need to be firing a lot of caffeine in to get the system up and going. So yeah, it's a good question. So 12 hours before, so just be conscious of your sleep. And another thing, obviously, we're dealing with nutrition here. Sleep is one of the biggest determining factors in your progress with muscle growth. If your sleep is poor, your recovery is poor, your results will suffer. You'll still make progress, but it's a lot slower. So if your caffeine is to get maybe an extra kilo on your lift, but then it knocks your sleep, it's not worth the ratio. Yeah. Any other questions? Good. Yeah. 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 What I would say there is probably looking at the timing of your food. So let's say, for example, if we are eating a large portion of our foods in the beginning of the day and then not much in the evening, then it can get to the point where if you, let's say, for example, beginning of the day, I eat the majority of my calories and I do a lot of activity, then later in the day, I don't really have much to eat and I'm feeling hungry again, that's where you're going to struggle. So like, it's just looking at timings and then making sure our ratio is correct. So that could be an example. If let's say your protein was at 40%, your fats were at 30%, but your carbs were lower, 30%, and maybe they need to be 15% higher. That's where that comes in. So let's say if somebody was consistently struggling with that, what we do there then is we take away from the protein, take away from the fats, increase the carbs. So that way they're feeling fuller because carbs will generally, it'll fill you up a little bit more, but also as well for carbs, 1 gram of carbs is 4 calories, 1 gram of protein is 4 calories, 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. If I reduce your fats, I can increase your carbs, but it's doubling up on the amount that you're getting. So that would be the situation. Well, yeah, it could be, yeah. It could just be maybe having for you individually, it could be just increasing the amount of carbs you're having in the evening, yeah. But you could, it's also, it's not bad in the start of the day either because a lot of people's activities in the beginning of the day. But for an individual basis, for you, what I'll do is we'll look at your logs and I'll look at the timings of when you're putting the things in, and then I'll look at the ratio. And if you're hitting the ratio dead on and the timing is good, then we'll increase the carbs, for example, and that can help that. Yeah. Any other questions? No? So just on the topic of hunger, you're all going to be hungry. That's normal. Like you're basically what you're telling your body now is we're eating less than we need. So there is going to be hunger. After the first week, it gets a little bit better. So it's just the first week can be a bit hard sometimes, but generally it's not too aggressive of a deficit that you're going to be starving. Like you'll be hungry, and some people can be dramatic about it, some people aren't. But it just depends on the individual. But don't be worried about it. After the first week, it becomes a lot easier and it's a lot more sustainable. And like I was saying, if there ever is doubt, let's just say, for example, you're logging for 3 weeks and your weight hasn't come down, 99.9% of the time, it's the accuracy of the logs. It's very, very rarely the number that I give you. The number I give you is a formula that's been studied so many times, and then I've taken into account all of your exercise. So, just an example of that, last time somebody was 3 weeks in, they were struggling to lose the weight. I look at their logs and they haven't logged one Saturday or Sunday. So then I know, okay, obviously every weekend is the reason why you're not losing weight. It's nothing to do with your number. So the number works if you stick to the number. So that means 7 days a week. Another question that people ask as well is about, let's say, for example, if next Saturday I'm going out drinking with my friends and we're going to have a meal out, how do we combat that? You've got the choice there. So the option here is if I do nothing and I eat the same calories in my deficit all week, if the amount of calories I consume, it might just level out and you might not just not lose any weight that week. Or if you say, I don't want this to affect my progress, we go maybe 150 calories under the number I give you on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That gives you an additional 450 calories for that Saturday night. So whatever your number is with the additional 450, then it's about balancing the calories on that day. So that's calorie banking. So that's a method that you use to make sure that events don't get in the way. Because you'd obviously hope you don't have too many events during this next 6 weeks so they do add an extra challenge. But like I was saying, sacrifice now to get the results or let it dent your progress. The positive is, let's just say you don't lose weight. You being in that deficit stops you gaining weight from that. So it's all just about playing that number as much as you can. So on that, just on the topic of social occasions, sometimes they're unavoidable, but being 100% honest with you, I wouldn't go seeking them too much in these next 6 weeks because if you consistently go looking for them, it's going to make it really hard for you. So you want to give yourself the best chance of success. If I said I'm going for pints with the lads every single Friday for the next 6 weeks, I like to bank all my calories, I'm going to be miserable Monday to Thursday all the time because I'm constantly trying to play catch up. So it's not to say to not do them because it's important to obviously be present for these things, but do take into account they will directly affect your progress. And that might just be, sometimes it can be good that if I'm 100 kilos and I was in a deficit Monday to Saturday, and then Sunday I had a rake load of calories, and I'm 100 kilos again, it means it stopped you from going to 101. It stopped it going the other way. So that's one positive of it. But obviously, you've got to sacrifice. Like I was saying, you can't do what you've been doing expecting a different result and a different outcome. Is that cool? Okay. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate your time. And like I was saying, any questions at all, you can pop me a text, but I'll be in touch via email. I'll send you out everything that I need you to do, and everything I need you to do will be listed in detail. And then all I need you to be is just as fast as you can because there's a lot of you here and I have to go do it all for all of you. So I just need it to be as quick as possible. Don't email me on Monday morning saying, sorry, I'm late, because it just makes it really hard for me because on Monday, I'm doing PT, I'm doing other calls and a lot of check-ins. There's a lot of things to do. I can't play catch up. I've dedicated this whole weekend to do this. So just get it done for me over the weekend. Yeah, it takes you 5 minutes. It takes hours for me. So just make sure we get it done. Yeah. Thank you all for coming, guys. Appreciate it.